Welcome. Zack Peter is here from No Filter Podcast. I have been trying to have him on. We've been trying to connect, but we've been living busy lives for so long, and now you're here. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Love your podcast.
Thank you. I love yours.
You're an OG podcaster too.
Yeah, been in it a minute. Still going strong.
Right? Wait. I feel like you and I might have started around the same time. My show's about 8 years old. Isn't yours?
10 years in April.
10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Weren't those first couple of years brutal? Nobody knew where to find a podcast.
Nobody knew what the fuck a podcast was. Like, nobody knew what podcast. I remember trying to explain it to people. I didn't even know what a podcast was when I agreed to do it. And so, yeah, I never would have expected it to take off the way that it has. But the funny thing is, I always knew that video, there were so many gut instincts that I had at the beginning that I wish I would have listened to, because once I started implementing those things in recent years, that's what really helps the podcast flourish.
Okay, like what?
A video. I was a big proponent of doing video since the very beginning because I started on YouTube. And then I transitioned to podcast, and then now I've gone back to YouTube. But video was a big one that I was like, we need to do good, high quality video for the show. And I was, fought against it for years until finally I had to prove people right and be like, hello, video is the future, and it is now the present.
No, wait a minute. When you started, did you originally have a co-host? Was it what it is now, or how did it start?
No, it was pop culture based. I was doing stand-up at the time, and there was this teeny tiny, the first ever podcast studio ever. Okay. And Joe Rogan was taping out of there, and I remember them telling me Joe Rogan has a podcast, and this can be. And they had a lot of comedians there, and they wanted to bring in more comedy talent, but they didn't have anybody in pop culture. And they're like, "Come and give this a try." And at first, I was just like, "This is stupid. I'm an on-camera talent. I'm not going to do a radio show." And they're like, "It's not a radio show. It's on demand, and it's just going to really, take off in a few years." And I was like, "I don't know." And they're just like, "Give it a shot." And I was like, "Okay, I'll give it a year." And if it doesn't work in a year, I'm done. And it didn't work for maybe the first 4 years. And it was just a waste of time. Well, I wouldn't say a waste of time, because it was really just a learning experience.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing is there's so much experience and so many lessons that I've learned throughout the process of it that now I'm not scared of anything. I've been removed from Apple. I've lost all of my ratings. I've had guests cancel at the last minute. I had a big, 30th birthday bash live show that I was doing at the Bourbon Room, and Bravo called and blocked Lala Kent from coming on stage the day of. I have been through so many things in this podcast world that nothing scares me anymore. I know I will always survive. And they're just, you learn to trust yourself more.
Wait, I didn't even know Apple could remove you. How does Apple remove you?
There was, I think it was a copyright issue, because I was having at the time different pop artists that were coming on the show to promote their music. And then I think I got flagged for copyright infringement because we would play the song on their show, but they technically didn't own it, and PR wasn't communicating. And so the Apple algorithm was just reading and flagging it for copyright infringement. So yeah, it happened to me twice. Mostly, actually, one was a distributor transition issue, and the second one was the copyright issue. And both times, I lost all my reviews and had to build back from scratch.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and now, now you have people that understand this stuff so much more, so you don't have these tech issues. But it's
Frig, wow, you've really, you've survived it all.
Well, even just 2 weeks ago, there was a communication issue, and we ended up switching distributors, and the feed was down for a week and a half on Apple. And I was like,
Sad. No, wait, let's back up. Okay, so you did stand-up. I love this. This is always, I've dabbled in stand-up. When I first moved here 3 years ago, I did this amazing stand-up class and started out. But I actually go to bed at 9 o'clock every night. So I physically can't stand up past 9:30. That's what I tell people. There's no way my career, but what happened? Did you like it? It's also I've already built this podcasting brand where I can be funny. Yeah. And I'm if I want to do stand-up and really succeed, I am starting over. This is going to be so much work.
Yes. I I did it for about 2 years. Really enjoyed it. I mean, it's grueling.
Wow,
It's
you did that
so
for a long time.
grueling.
It is.
I mean, I performed at like the Laugh Factory, Comedy Store, Gotham in New York, Ice House in Pasadena, like, some good spots. And I did enjoy it. It's very grueling. But when I found that I could still be funny and be witty without having to be in that environment, which, like you said, is very late night. And I'm not a late night person either.
Oh.
I would always want to do like the 8 o'clock show or the 9 o'clock show, but I never wanted to do the fucking 10 o'clock show. I'm like, who's awake at that time? And so,
or 11 p.m. They're like,
Yeah,
we have a
no.
spot for you at 11:35.
pass.
I'll be in
Thank you.
REM sleep by then.
No, so yeah, I liked it, but then when I found that I could, there's this other new medium that was a bit more long form that I could play around with and still showcase my personality. I was like, okay, I think I found my footing in this.
That first year of podcasting, when you and Joe Rogan were podcasting out of the same studio, would you see him? Would you be like, oh, this guy from here, this loser?
No, but he was one of the only like examples of like him, and I think like Tim Ferriss, were like podcasting successfully at that time. Lewis Howes was kind of really starting to come up around then. And so, I was like, oh, well, why don't you have, I wanted Rogan to come on my show more than pitching myself to go into, I was like, can Rogan come on my show? Like, I had no concept of what was going. I was like, yeah, can I just book him as a guest on my show? And they're like, all right, we'll see what we can make happen. And I was like, okay. And I had no clue who Joe Rogan was at that time, little to, find out how big he's become, which is so funny now because we were just having a conversation about some of the background stuff in this industry. But it's so funny because I got a really bad piece of advice from this guy that repped me that has no longer reps me. But I remember at the time, he wanted me to just stick to Talking Housewives and like stick to only Housewives and recapping TV shows and don't talk about anything else because that's where the bread and butter is. And then I was like, but I like to talk about my personal life. I like to talk about bigger issues. I like to talk about these deeper issues that are important to me that people seem to connect with me on. And he was like, listen, nobody wants another Joe Rogan style show. That's not what advertisers and brands are interested in. And I said, fuck you. And I left, and I'm making a lot more money without him than I ever was when he was representing me. And I'm I wouldn't consider myself a Joe Rogan style show. I think we're very different.
Well, you're headed there though. I've loved what you've done over the past couple of months, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you and I were talking about it before we started, but I thought it was awesome of you to like take a stance as a gay Hispanic man after the election. I loved when you came on after Trump was elected. You were like, I'm not afraid. Like I'm here. Like, I mean, you've really taken risks. I love it. I'm sort of in the thick. I'm going through this too. Like I'm in the thick of this Sister Wives. Like people really know me for this commentary, right? But I'm with you. I like these other bigger conversations.
And you know what's funny? And this is advice to like anybody else that wants to join the podcast game. They're afraid of the temporary bruising, right?
Yes.
And they don't realize it's temporary. Perfect example. There's this guy, really cute guy, new to podcasting, reached out to me a while back. Wanted to have me on a show, like really sweet to me. Oh my God, you're so inspired. You've motivated me to like start a podcast, all that stuff. And then the election comes out and I talk about that. Immediately unfollowed me, which there are a lot of people that ran into the shadows at that time because they're like, whoa, getting controversial now. And they've all come back. All the followers that may have dipped at that point have probably 4 times come back.
Oh, yeah. I think once you're true to who you are, Republican, Democrat, in the middle, whatever you are, you find your people.
Not even politics though, but like I remember the biggest hit that I took last year was supporting Lala Kent during last season of Vanderpump Rules, and everybody hated me for being like, I actually think she's kind of a voice of reason and Ariana's a diva. And I know that wasn't the popular thing to say, but it was honest to me. And I remember, I think I lost like 1,000 followers on Instagram just from one video that I had made. And like, they've all come back and they all always do.
Yes.
Yeah. But that guy that unfollowed me and all that stuff, this morning texted me and he's like, oh my God, I would love to, refollowed me this morning. And then was like, oh my God, I would love to have you on my podcast.
And I hope you sent back the middle finger and you were like, fuck, are you going on?
Responded. I'm just like, fuck you. Like you treated me like I was the plague in November. And what, now that you've seen that we're popping
you're having
off
enormous
because,
success.
Yeah. Now that there's been, a little blip, now all of a sudden your morals have changed?
People are such fair weather fans, aren't they? Are you are you
they're
kind of
so fickle.
Are you a bit of a grudge holder? Because I used to not be, but now I don't know. I guess maybe getting older or maybe like having success. Now I feel like I'm motivated by spite.
Yes.
I think I DM'd you that.
Anytime anybody fucks me over or wants to turn their back on me for whatever, I'm always like, wait, just watch. And like I said, with that guy that repped me, he and one of my other friends, who's another podcaster, or actually two others, three of us left this rep at the same time. And I remember him being like, I'll eat a frog if you make more money than without me. And I'm like, guess what, baby? I know what shows you represent, and me and these other people are ranking a lot higher than those shows are right now. So the tides can always turn, and it's good when you don't listen to bad advice.
You better send that frog. When's that coming?
Oh, I can't wait.
I know.
I want to find a way to ship a frog.
I know.
Ship a box of frogs.
How do we ship live frogs? I know. It's so true. So, when you started your show, okay, it did start pop culture. Have you always been drawn to reality television, or was that like how it kind of?
It was very general pop culture, and then I kind of went through like a health and wellness era, so I tried to like explore that for a little bit, and that didn't really stick. And so then I ended up really leaning into like reality TV, and so I think it really took off when I started talking about the shows that I really liked, rather than just these are the headlines and this is the news, when it was something that I was interested in. And then I made it super micro down to reality, and then down to like Bravo and Housewives and stuff. Then that's when I feel like the show really started to get like its niche following.
And what's the filter you use now? Because it sounds like you have a very good gut. Like do you only really cover shows you like, or do you force yourself to like watch things that like you're not interested?
No, I won't force myself to watch anything anymore. I think again, 2024, when you have people in your ear, like I tried that, but it's like, or even like there are some shows like Southern Charm that I enjoy, but I'm probably not going to talk about them much on the podcast, because it wasn't that interesting for me to recap that or to discuss it. Like, it was a good episode and great. Oh yeah, I saw Southern Charm last night. It was great. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not super into the topic, I don't want to talk about it.
That's such a good, Isn't that the beauty of podcasting? It's so amazing. So amazing. Okay, you were born and raised in Los Angeles. You've shared a lot about your family, your brother. You have an autistic brother. You're an advocate. You've raised money. What was that like growing up with, probably 20 years ago, when not a lot of people talked about autism? Like, you've seen the full circle of it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like autism really became, very well known in more of a mainstream way when Jenny McCarthy came out.
Yes.
And she kind of was like, this is my son. She was like the first real celebrity. We had Holly Robinson Peete, who also came out around that time, but she wasn't as vocal as I think Jenny was. And Jenny was lucky enough to have Oprah, support her in the books that she was writing at the time. And I think that's what kind of made people more aware of autism. And my brother.
Sure. That was the first time we ever heard vaccines and autism. Could there be a connection? And yeah.
So my brother is the same age as her son, diagnosed around the same time. So kind of we were exploring, what autism is at the same time that she was going through this so publicly. And so, at the time I didn't really understand it. I think I was maybe like 10 years old, and I was like, what is autism? I thought it was spelled with like an O. I'm like, how do you spell that on Google? And so I was like, I don't get it, but I just know, like, I remember the difference in my brother when he was like a baby, and I would play with my siblings, and he would react. And then I remember he just suddenly like stopped responding.
Yeah.
And so, at 10 years old, you don't understand that, other than you feel that as rejection, right? I'm like, he doesn't like me. And that's probably why I decided to pursue, needing to be adored by the world, because my brother turned me down. But so it was something. And so it was through reading Jenny's books that I kind of like at least started to understand it a little bit better. Yeah. And then, by the time I was 17, that's when I met her and then began working for her and helped, run her organization, which was able to help a lot of families all throughout the US. And we did stuff internationally, and, it really took off.
Where is her organization now? Obviously, very hot take with if vaccines connect to autism. A lot of people have very strong feelings one way or the other, right? And she got, at first she was like celebrated, then she got tremendous backlash.
Yeah.
So what happened is the organization still going?
So Well, first to clarify, because people always branded us an anti-vaccine organization,
Right.
which was never the case. Like it was, what the organization did is we provided people with access to, we covered their doctor's bills, we covered lab testing, we helped them with nutritional counseling to remove gluten and dairy, because when you actually go into everyone's favorite word this time of the millennium is science. When you dig into the science and the research, you see that there are a lot of gut issues, or that there are a lot of what are considered comorbid conditions that come under the umbrella diagnosis of autism. So when you address those, right, when you introduce, because we were called crazy quacks 15 years ago for saying, hey, why don't we try probiotics? And people are like, probiotics, there's no science behind probiotics. And then now, Jamie Lee Curtis is eating probiotics in Activia yogurt, but it was crazy to see 15 years ago how radical and quackery it was to remove gluten.
It's a good reminder for people too, because I think, people often don't know history, don't think about history. But, the backlash that we see for all these topics politically and Republicans versus Democrat or vaccine, it really has been going on for forever right now. It's not really anything
heightened
new
now because social media, and so it's more in our face. It's more prevalent in front of us because we have screens in front of us all day. But so, the focus of the organization was just about treating the underlying issues that come associated with autism. Yes, there was a conversation that Jenny introduced through her first book, which was about, hey, something happened to my son. And most people don't even understand her story without the media manipulation of what the narrative around her is that she says vaccines cause autism, which is never what she said. She's never said that. But she said, hey, my son went in, got his routine, went into cardiac arrest. We had to be taken into the hospital in an ambulance because he had such an adverse reaction. And then next thing you know, after that, all of these signs and symptoms started to come forth, whereas before he was developing normally. And so she's like, as a mom, I'm concerned. And I think it's really strange when we take, someone like Jenny, who was a mother and was concerned about something that happened to her son, and used the platform that she had to say, hey, I have questions.
Yeah.
And suddenly we want to shame a woman and, only look at her for posing for Playboy. And what does she know? Because she has big tits and blonde hair. She must be an idiot. When it's like, but those are legitimate concerns that she has,
Yeah.
And then you look at the money that goes into the money behind a lot of this stuff. And you're like, okay, well now, and the thing is, I don't think I would be the person that I am today, or as outspoken about things today, if I didn't see all of that go down then, right? See the media manipulation of her, see how dishonest the press is. I mean, we even look at this Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni stuff, and look at the New York Times, and look at how they strategize this, not even a lawsuit, but this legal filing that Blake did in, California, like just that whole situation. You just see the tricks. And it's interesting because now I'm starting to see more of a mainstream population wake up to this stuff. And it's like, even for a minute, there was like a good period where I kind of went numb to it and fell asleep to it. And then I was like, wait a minute, I've seen this all before.
Yeah. Well, by the way, why do you think that media does it? Do you think it's for money? Do you think it's just for clicks?
I mean,
why do you think they're willing
at the end of the day, money, it's all rooted in money, right? The clicks drive the money. And when you look at where mainstream media is now compared to new media and digital media, new media is pushing the forefront, right?
Podcasts.
Not many people are watching, how many people are still watching tonight's segment on CNN? But you look at how many millions of people have watched my videos about Blake and Baldoni over the weekend, and it's like, that shift is changing. So what do they have to do? They have to, make sure that people stay focused and their eyes glued on them. So they're going to sensationalize things. They're going to hype things up. They're going to blow things up. And then when they have vested interest where, they have backers that they have to protect, that's going to determine funding as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's wrap up the autism, because your Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively coverage has been unbelievable. And I really wanted, perfect week to have you on, because I really want you to unpack it, because I have a lot of questions for you.
Yeah.
So Jenny's organization's still there.
No. Sorry. So the organization wrapped in 2019.
Okay.
Yes, the board at the time, just everybody had a different direction of where they wanted to. Some people wanted to focus on legislation. Some people wanted to focus on medical housing for adults. And so the board at that time just decided, let's all kind of go our own way and pursue our own passions. And Jenny and I still work together. We have a new organization that we support that's was founded by my brother and her son's doctor, Dr. Jerry Cartzinell. It's called Home Life Community. We don't have an active role in it, but we will fundraise for them. We had a poker tournament that we hosted last year for them, and it's to provide housing for adults with autism.
Where is the autism community, meaning people like yourself that are really in it, that obviously your brother is so impacted? What's the belief now of where autism is and what causes it? Is it environmental? Like, where is it? Because you know.
So the conversation that we always had at the foundation was there is some sort of genetic component, sure, but we thought that the genetic component was a genetic vulnerability that combined with environmental influence, right? Environmental toxins. And some people like to hyper focus on just vaccines, but it's like you look at how much our environment has changed overall. There are a number of factors, and so when you add all of these things together, these developing infants, like of course that's going to be a heavy burden on them. So even with us, we were like, change the paint in your house from, get rid of lead, change the mattresses and the furniture because there's off-gassing. I mean, come on, even Jessica Alba and Kate Hudson wrote books about all of these things about, detoxing your household. But again, when Jenny was doing it before them, it was controversial, So yeah, there are a number of factors, but I think personally, there's a genetic susceptibility and an environmental trigger.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, now, look, we're seeing, I mean, I don't know directly if there's a cause, but I mean, because I'm also old, but, there's like, it's fertility for women is insane. You're just seeing later and later, miscarriages, the struggle to get pregnant, stay pregnant, it's wild.
Autoimmune conditions are skyrocketing, right? I mean, even the Ozempic craze, like everyone's super into Ozempic, but it's like, but how did we get here? It's because there was an obesity crisis, right? And it's just, it's crazy. And so these things don't happen because they weren't happening 30, 40 years ago. And there's, obviously other environmental factors that are now playing a role in that. And we can't, that's why I think, and one thing that I was very outspoken that I'm excited to see RFK come in.
I am too. I root for him. I don't understand, do I agree with everything he says? No.
But there's no one person that you're ever going to agree with.
Correct.
100%,
My thought to friends that, think he's just such a whack job is like, but we know there's a problem with our food and our everything, and Coca-Cola being cheaper than anything else. I mean, we know that the big companies are lobbying and buying the FDA and USDA. So what's the harm in having somebody that's at least saying, hey, I'm going to put you all on notice? I mean, isn't that what we want government to do? I mean, even if we don't like him as a package, it's like, at least he's the first person that's like,
that's willing to challenge that system.
I'm firing you all. It's like, they should be fired.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they've obviously driven us into a crisis where, I mean, you look at just, not autism, but ADHD and all these other developmental disorders that have just skyrocketed in the last 20 years. And it's like, clearly what we're doing is not working. So why are we going to keep doing it?
I mean, I think it's even only in the past decade that like women have woken up to the fact candles that you burn in your house constantly that, you think, oh, I love this smell. I mean, they're filled with shit that you're just putting in your air that mess up your hormones and like everything, just make everything go sideways in your body. So it's like, finally, we're beginning to see the stuff you put on your skin. To your point, you constantly bombard yourself with that. Then you try to carry a healthy child. It's so in your cells and DNA. They're being passed all that. Yeah. I'm excited too. I hope for the, I think for me, I've become jaded for politics. Like, I think they're all corrupt and I don't know, but I'm hopeful, but
which is all we can be. That's why I'm like, I always tell people, I'm like, listen, it may not be the best case scenario, but like the most we can do is be hopeful and like take every little win we can get.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, I would rather focus on the little wins rather than focus on the sensationalized, like, oh my God, this is happening today. It's like,
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to your incredible coverage of Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. I have a lot of questions because I went on vacation while you were working, and I was like, I'm not going to follow stuff. And then now I've sort of come back online and I'm reading. But your videos, everyone needs to watch under No Filter, Zack Peter on your Instagram. They're so good, millions and millions of views, because you do a lot of research in really breaking down what these lawsuits mean. So can you summarize for us the New York Times article that really kicked this whole thing off? There's always been rumblings. That's been going on for many months. But then the New York Times article dropped in early December. What did that?
Late December, right before Christmas.
Late December.
The 23rd, I think.
Thank you. What did that article, what was your interpretation of that article?
You know, it's so funny. We have a mutual friend, Donna Bowling, and she sent me the article right away. She's like, oh my God, have you read this? And I was like, Donna, I'm with my family. I couldn't give two shits about this. This is going to be such a boring story. Like, she'd be like, but have you read it? Read the complaint. And then I literally text her. I'm like, Donna, send it to Daryl. I am not interested. And she reminded me of that. We were talking last night. She's like, remember, you told me send it to Daryl. Now here you are blowing up with it all over the internet. And just because the initial thing about like, oh, she's, Blake Lively is, that was the headline. Blake Lively is suing for sexual harassment against or from Justin Baldoni on the set of It Ends With Us. And I remember the rumblings of like, there's some drama. Are they beefing? What's the
and the way Blake promoted her, dropped her hair care line and wore all these floral outfits, for Lily Bloom for the movie. And a lot of people felt like this is a domestic violence film. You're like doing all these promotional things that have nothing to do with the film.
Yep. And I didn't want to read it initially, but Donna's like, you have to read it. It's so wild. It's so great. And I was like, I don't know if I believe it. I was like, but let me go into this and let me see. And I'm like, okay, let me Google this. Let me read the article. And then I was like, oh, it's on the New York Times. Oh, there's no paywall on this article. Oh, I can download it as a PDF. I was like, this is really out of the ordinary, because I've covered celebrity legal scandals for the last 4 years, right? Starting with the Girardi stuff. And that was when I got my highlighter out and I was trying to read things and learn legal terms and understand how to break and what lawsuits are and what civil complaints are. And to me, I was like, I remember you have to jump through hoops to get some of these documents. Like, this is making it super accessible for people. And I'm like, there's something about this that feels off, but whatever, let me read through it. And so I was reading through all of it and I was like, there are a lot of big accusations, but I'm not seeing any weight to them. And it's, and then even like with Donna, I was talking to her about it because she was very much like, this sounds crazy. And I'm like, it does sound crazy, but also like there's something weird about this that feels off. And then, that's when I put my critical thinking cap on and I was like, wait a minute. The New York Times is the one that blew the lid on the Harvey Weinstein scandal. And they had Rose McGowan as their smoking gun. And, this is a civil complaint filed in California, not an official lawsuit. And also, you don't need to include so many of these details in this civil complaint. And why did she file a civil complaint and not an actual lawsuit? And then people are like, oh, well, she did that because, it's her prerequisite to sue. And like, she's gonna sue. She's gonna file a lawsuit, but she had to get permission first. And I was like, okay, but then why did she file it in California when the movie was filmed in New Jersey? She lives in New York. Like, what was it about California? And how did the New York Times get it? And like, why are they making it an easy to download PDF? Like, what in the, sign up for our emails and you get a free download to our guide? Like, I was like, what? Like, this is an old marketing hack. Like, what is happening here? And then in reading through it, there were, a lot of big allegations. And I was like, he doesn't sound like a good dude. And I was reading the text messages that she revealed.
Okay, and just to go over some of those, like he apparently showed the video of his wife giving birth to Blake Lively.
His producer did. Jamie Heath is also named in the lawsuit with him because now it is a lawsuit. But so yeah, some of the allegations were he called her sexy and they were entering her dressing room while she was breastfeeding without permission. And he called another actress on set hot. And he hired his friend to do the birthing scene. And there was the video of them showing her this naked woman, and it was, pornographic footage that she felt uncomfortable with.
And he also apparently talked about his pornography past addiction. Yeah. And then I guess at one point he said that he was psychic and, had spoken to her father who had passed away a couple of years ago. Yep. So so these allegations, strange. Right.
And I was like, okay, this doesn't make him look good. There are two sides to the story. I was like, but we're only getting her side. I go, I can't make a judgment until I hear what his response to some of these things are, because they sound weird and creepy, but they also don't have a ton of evidence behind them. And there's no context behind it, right? They were entering my room when I was breastfeeding. Okay, did they just come unwarranted? Was there a meeting? Did they stay and you told them not to? And then my other thing was, well, did these things come up and did you address them and did it stop? Like, was it an isolated incident that you addressed and that didn't happen again? And then now you're just putting this culmination of all of these things together. Like, I just had a lot of questions, and I was like, there are a lot of open-ended questions that we don't have answers to. And then his lawsuit comes out. And his lawsuit was an actual lawsuit. Hers was a complaint filed in California. His was an actual lawsuit that he filed in California against the New York Times, claiming libel. So it's a defamation case. And then he also claimed promissory fraud and breach of contract, breach of said in fact contract, breach of something, some sort of breach. I don't remember the exact thing, but I was like, okay, well, let's read his lawsuit and let's read his story. And his story, I feel like her complaint gave us the coloring book, but there was no color on the pages. And his lawsuit brought a lot more color and context to the actual picture. And I was like, okay, this is starting to come together a bit more, because now he's responding to some of her claims, like, oh, she said that I said her outfit was sexy on set and she felt that I was inappropriate. And they're like, well, here's her text message saying that she wanted her character to look sexier on set. And so, she was making tweaks to the wardrobe. So when she said she wanted her character to look sexier, I was like, oh my God, yeah, your character does look sexy. So you add that context and it changes things a bit, right?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, well, she said that we came in during breastfeeding, but she invited us to a meeting in her trailer. And so and it was also with the female producer. And so Jamie Heath goes to check on her and he goes in and he's like, oh my God, your breastfeeding is now a good time. And she's like, yeah, now's fine. Right. So she invites them and then says that it's okay. There were other claims that she was openly breastfeeding on the set. So like, how do you know that this time is uncomfortable and that time isn't uncomfortable? Yeah. And then there's like a text message that Justin Baldoni revealed that said that, she's like, hey, I'm just pumping in my trailer. Do you want to come run lines with me? And he's like, okay, I'm wrapping up with the crew. I'll meet you in hair and makeup. So it's like she disclosed that she was breastfeeding, but she didn't say, hey, wait until after. Like, she invites him to come run lines with her while she happens to be pumping, Context matters in a lot of these things. And so I'm like, okay, when you add in the context and you have in these text message, or to me, one of the biggest ones was she said that there was no intimacy coordinator until she demanded one. And then we see a text message prior to filming where Justin's telling her, hey, here's the intimacy coordinator. Do you want to meet with her? And she declines to meet with her, which to me at the bare minimum tells me she was aware that there was an intimacy coordinator from the beginning. So for her to say it didn't exist until she demanded it is a flat out lie.
Okay. And what do people respond? Because I've brought this point up too, like on my podcast, talking about this, getting caught up on this case. And I've brought that up to people and they say, well, he hired the intimacy coordinator, which was inappropriate, that she should have had say in the intimacy coordinator. Okay, can you explain this part to me? Because I'm confused about this. Justin Baldoni was the director, right?
Correct.
What involvement in the actual making of the film did Blake Lively have?
So Justin Baldoni was not just the director. His company was producing the film.
Wayfarer,
so he's
right?
the main producer.
Okay.
He's the director, and he owned the rights to the book.
Okay,
so if anybody was responsible for hiring everybody,
wouldn't it be him?
It was his job, and I'm sure he has a team of people that are also helping him make those decisions. So that's a really weird argument of like, why didn't she get to choose the intimacy coordinator? Because she didn't have any real power on set. And it's brought up in the lawsuit as well that yes, she was given a vanity title of executive producer, which is standard for the lead actor or actress to just be listed as the executive producer. But it made it clear what her roles and responsibilities were in her contract that didn't include all those other pieces, which to be fair, I don't think she cared to be involved in all of those other pieces, like hiring the intimacy coordinator or any of that, because the more responsibility you have, the more liability that's on your shoulders. So I'm sure there were certain things she didn't care to be dealt with.
Yeah, I'm so curious about that because it does seem like, too, reading a lot of his complaint and then these emails coming out between the PR people, like she took over in wanting editing, say, and showing him how he should pull her in and like
then
what
there's
he
video
should do.
footage of that. So that's the thing. It's like we have her words and then we have text messages, emails, and video footage of things that contradict what she's saying. So that to me is where it's like, well, when you have to look at it as, you know, because I saw like on Nick Viall, there was one of his co-hosts on there, and she was just like, it's black and white. It's black and white. And I'm like, it's not black and white. Nothing's ever black and white. But this specifically is not black and white because there's so many other pieces to it. And you can't remove the nuance and context. Otherwise, it then becomes a polarizing black and white case. And listen, if we're going black and white, Blake's not looking good.
Okay, so you also had one other take on this, which I had been feeling, and you articulated it, and I was like, oh my God, I'm thinking exactly what Zack is thinking. So you had said, kind of throwing out the idea, did these two catch feelings for each other? Because this lawsuit, it doesn't make, at least, again, you know, it looks like they might be going to court. Maybe there's other evidence. Obviously, Justin Baldoni's lawyer says, we're going to publish every single thing. But it's not like adding up, to your point, you know? So I loved that theory. Was that something you just thought? Like, did these two,
I think
something happened between them?
I thought it because I was like, there's too much, like, it's too messy. This is like a messy divorce, right? Where you've been together for years and there's like emotional hurt and pain behind it, and you just want to claw each other's eyes out.
We're going to fight over the sofa.
That's literally what this is. And I'm like, you don't have stakes this high and a mess this big if there's not something much deeper underneath it. And I remember Donna Bowling, our friend, texted me and she's like, do you think that they fell in love with each other? Or do you think Blake was in love with him? And I was like, I'm so glad you said this because I did think so. But like, I didn't think to say anything because I thought maybe like that was a weird theory and I wanted to stay focused on the facts of the case rather than my own conjecture. But like, it just makes sense that there has to be some, like, maybe she caught feelings for him. Then you bring into the history of like how her and Ryan Reynolds met on the set of The Green Lantern when he was married to Scarlett Johansson and she was dating Penn Badgley. And next thing you know they're, they separate and then they're dating soon after and then they're married shortly after. And it's, you know, it's not uncommon that people fall in love on these sets all the time. Because again, it's just, she doesn't have a strong case against him. And I think where she even falls even more flat is this alleged PR smear campaign. That was the biggest red flag to me, actually, when she accused him of a PR smear campaign and made it seem like, oh, his team did this takedown of me. Because I was like, wait, I remember watching this play out in real time. And from what I remember, she was tanking her own reputation through, as you said, the way she was promoting the film with bring your florals and here's my alcohol brand. Be sure to buy my alcohol and buy my hair care line and all of these things that people were like, this is tone deaf. And I think that happens so often where people see things online and then it has a viral moment and it takes a life of its own. And it's not always, and it's very rarely PR orchestrated because PR can only orchestrate things so much that they can't control viral moments on the internet. And they can try to fake them, but it often doesn't land, i.e. this New York Times article that I believe they were trying to make the next Harvey Weinstein scandal.
Okay, I have two last questions on this, and then we never have enough time in studio. But anyway, and we're going to do your show. But okay, so one last question. In the New York Times article, people have said that, you know, the New York Times, I guess, has written in fine print that like some of these text messages or emails have kind of been edited only for length. But do you think that was too much of journalistic liberty? Did you feel in that article? Since then, to your point, Justin Baldoni's PR people have released everything where they're actually saying, we feel bad for her. My God, look, did you see this? She's getting destroyed. Like that kind of thing. Although, and then back, he is sort of saying that he's worried that she's trying to destroy him. And he's almost kind of saying, we need this like, plan, basically, if she tries to destroy us. So there was obviously some real disconnect. But anyway, did you feel like reading it, and since you've looked at so many of these articles, that the New York Times, you felt like it was off the way that they had published it?
Yes, because when yes, they've altered text messages for length, but you can't just say it's altered for length when one, you're the New York Times and you can write an article as long as you want,
Could
number
be 60
one.
pages,
and number two, when that length removes the context, that's when it becomes manipulative, right? And the biggest example for me, one of the biggest red flags in his lawsuit, because he showed the screenshots of the text messages. She, in her lawsuit, rewrote the text messages and put them in blurbs, and that's common in lawsuits, is they rewrite certain things and present them as text messages. But you can see he clearly shows the screenshot of it, whereas they have the rewriting of it. And in the two side by side comparison that Baldoni puts in his lawsuit, you can even see that not only are there pieces of the text messages removed, but there's also, like, the biggest piece was one of the text messages had an emoji, and people are like, well, what does one emoji have to do with it? But the emoji was an upside down face to show that the tone of that text message was sarcastic, whereas the way it was presented in Blake's complaint is it was presented as literal, as we are planting this Daily Mail article, right? That was what it was in reference to, was this Daily Mail article, and they're like, oh yeah, we did this. So if you're just getting the article and we did this, it looks like, yeah, we did this. But then when you show the upside down face emoji, then you show, oh, it's sarcasm. Very important context.
Very important context.
And then you leave out the text messages where you find, Melissa Nathan getting tipped off about this Daily Mail article from the jump, where somebody else sent it to her being like, are you aware of this? Rather than her being the one that planted it and was like, oh, it's live now. Big difference.
Why, in your investigation so far, obviously, your opinion can change as this whole thing unfolds, but why do you believe Blake Lively has filed this complaint? Like, why do you think she's doing this?
I think they wanted to have another Harvey Weinstein scandal where she can come off, to save her image and her reputation. I think that this was a PR orchestrated attempt to rebrand her and show that she's not the bad person. And then there was an interesting theory that I saw online this morning, and the woman's name is blanking, and I feel bad for not crediting her, but she came up with a theory that I saw on Twitter about, let me see, I actually just sent it to someone. Let me pull it up and I'll read it for you directly with the, okay, it's this woman. Her name is Ariadna Jacob, and she's covered this a lot. And she said, here's my hunch. It's possible that Baldoni's deal with Colleen Hoover and Orsoni included a morality clause. We know about morality clauses in Hollywood. What is a morality clause? It's Hollywood's way of protecting a project, letting them terminate deals if someone's behavior risks reputational harm. And so we've heard rumors that Blake Lively wanted the rights to the second film. So it's possible that maybe they wanted to hurt his reputation bad enough so that he would have to forfeit the rights to the second film. That's a theory. Those are rumors. That's not confirmed. But, there are a lot of theories that are now going around that seem to check out. And so I think she wanted to save her image. But if anything, all this did was completely blow back on her.
As someone that's lived in Hollywood, worked in Hollywood for a long time, I mean, do you think this has the potential? Like, will he work again in Hollywood? I mean, they will, because
I don't know.
It's Ryan Reynolds, but I mean,
this is really hurting Ryan Reynolds' reputation in it as well. You're only as popular as the audience is willing to show up and see your movie. And if the audience stops caring about you, you become obsolete very quickly. And people are becoming so savvy to these PR and manipulation tactics that have been used for so many years in Hollywood that
they are.
People don't fall for the bullshit anymore, especially because you have people on TikTok that are there exposing it, and breaking it down for you and being like, look at this and here's the theory. And so I think that's changing how Hollywood works, and Hollywood's really starting to crumble. And I think Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are a perfect example of that the audience is not just going to believe you because you're more famous and
you have more money. Yeah, more money and clout. Okay, Zack, you have to come back. Zack Peter, No Filter. You actually have 3 podcasts. Where can people find you, listen? How often do you publish? Tell us everything.
No Filter is a daily podcast 5 days a week. Pop Report releases twice a week. Both pop culture news shows, just a little bit different. No Filter is a bit more of like my own personal opinions and investigations. Pop Report's a bit more general. And then I also have a show called Disaster Daters, which is sex, dating, and relationships, which is a lot of fun too. We had Tom Schwartz on that one, which was fun.
Oh, Schwartzy. Okay, Zack, thank you so much. Amazing.
Thank you.